KLM 4805 is ready for departure.
Climb to and maintain flight level 90, right turn after takeoff.
But in just 19 seconds, the lives of everyone on board will change forever. A blanket of fog has covered the runway. The captain can hardly see 200 meters ahead. The flight has already been delayed for hours, and if they don't leave soon, the crew will no longer be legally allowed to fly. The captain pushes the throttles forward. The engines roar. The massive 747 begins charging down the runway. But somewhere ahead, hidden inside that fog, another fully loaded 747 is taxiing on the very same runway. And when these two aircraft finally appear out of the fog, they will just have 9.5 seconds to save themselves. But this story doesn't begin here. It begins a few hours earlier, on the neighboring island, inside a little flower shop. It's a Sunday afternoon at Las Palmas Airport, the busiest airport in the Canary Islands. The Canary Islands are a part of Spain, sitting just off the northwest coast of Africa. These islands are a major holiday destination for people from Europe and for retirees from the Americas. And the airport terminal is packed with tourists. And inside Las Palmas Airport, in the departure area, right next to the check-in counters, is a small flower shop. And in this shop, hidden inside a duffel bag, is a bomb. And at 1:15 in the afternoon, that bomb explodes. The blast tears through the concourse and injures 8 people. A separatist group fighting for the independence of the Canary Islands from Spain claims responsibility. And then comes a phone call that changes everything. The caller says that there is a second bomb. The authorities have no choice. They evacuate the terminal and they shut down Las Palmas Airport completely. Every single inbound flight is turned away. The sky over Las Palmas is full of airplanes, ferrying tourists to the airport. Scheduled and charter flights from the Americas and Europe, all carrying holidaymakers, now suddenly with no place to land. There is only one airport within reach that can take them all. A small regional airport called Los Rodeos on the neighboring island called Tenerife. And among the dozens of aircraft now being funneled towards it are 2 Boeing 747s. Let's meet them. The first one is already famous. Pan American Flight 1736. Her name is Clipper Victor. And Clipper Victor is not just any 747. She is the 747. 7 years earlier, this exact aircraft flew from New York to London and became the first Boeing 747 in history to carry paying passengers. The jumbo jet era, the era of cheap intercontinental plane travel, began with Clipper Victor. And just 6 months later, she made history again. A man with a gun stood up in first class and ordered her captain to divert to Cuba. Clipper Victor became the first 747 to be hijacked. And when she landed in Havana, Fidel Castro himself came to the runway and asked the captain for a walking tour of the aircraft. She left Los Angeles the previous evening, stopped over in New York for a change of cruise, and has been flying through the night across the Atlantic. On board are 380 passengers, most of them retirees from California. Waiting for them in the harbor at Las Palmas is a cruise ship called the Golden Odyssey. It is ready to take them on a 2-week cruise off the Mediterranean. In command of Clipper Victor is 56-year-old Captain Victor Grubbs. Next to him is 39-year-old First Officer Robert Bragg, and behind them is 46-year-old Flight Engineer George Warnes. She was the first 747 in service and the first 747 to be hijacked. Today, on the 27th of March 1977, Clipper Victor is about to make history for the third and final time. The second aircraft is KLM Flight 4805, another Boeing 747. Her name is Rhine, the Rhine. She left Amsterdam at 9 o'clock this morning. On board are 14 crew and 235 passengers, most of them Dutch families heading south for an early Easter holiday in the sun. In the left-hand seat sits one of the most senior pilots at KLM. Captain Jacob van Zanten is 50 years old and the airline's chief flight instructor on the 747. He is the man who trains the men who fly it. When KLM took delivery of its very first jumbo, Van Zanten was the pilot they sent to Seattle to collect it. He is so senior and so trusted that KLM made him the face of the airline. His photograph appears in magazine advertisements around the world. The message is simple. This is the kind of man who flies you. Sitting beside him is First Officer Klaus Mears. He is 42 with 9,200 hours of flying behind him. But on the 747, he is relatively new. He qualified on the aircraft only 2 months ago and has just 95 hours on the type. And the man who signed off on that qualification is the man sitting beside him, Van Zanten. Behind them is flight engineer Willem Schrouder. At 48, he has more than 17,000 hours in the air, making him the most experienced man in the cockpit by flying time. So this is not an inexperienced crew. Quite the opposite. A veteran flight engineer, a first officer with thousands of hours behind him, and in command, the man KLM trusts to teach everyone else how to fly the 747. The 249 people on board could hardly have been placed in more experienced hands. Early afternoon. One after the other, the two 747s check in with ATC. And one after the other, they are told the same thing. The airport is closed and they need to divert to Tenerife. For the KLM, that is the end of it. Van Zanten turns his aircraft towards Tenerife. The man who has spent his career teaching pilots to follow the procedure follows the procedure. No arguments, no delays. Pan Am does not turn. Behind Captain Grubbs, the flight engineer runs the numbers. For them, fuel is not a problem. Clipper Victor has enough to stay in the air for close to 2 hours. The captain, assuming that this would be a minor delay, isn't keen on landing his 747 on a small and cramped regional airport. Why divert when he can just hold over Las Palmas and wait for it to reopen?
Negative, Clipper 1736 at the airport is closed and the reopening time is unknown. Divert to Los Rodeos.
His request is denied. Nobody holds. Everyone goes to Tenerife. It looks like nothing, a routine piece of traffic management on a busy afternoon. Had Grubbs been allowed to hold for even just 1 more hour, Clipper Victor might never have seen Tenerife at all. Let's talk about Tenerife, because this airport is not just where the story happens, it is one of the main characters in it. Los Rodeos Airport sits in the northeast corner of Tenerife Island, on a plateau 2,000 feet above sea level. It is nestled between mountains on all sides, and dominating the island is the highest peak in Spain, Pico del Teide. And this geography builds an interesting weather machine. When wet, warm air rolls in from the Atlantic and hits the island, it gets forced up the slopes of the mountains. As it climbs, it cools, condenses, and turns into clouds. And that cloud forms at around 2,000 feet, the exact height of this airport. So the clouds here don't just pass overhead. They settle onto the runway and just stay there. 1 minute, you can see 3 kilometers down the runway. 2 minutes later, you cannot see 300 meters. Right now at Los Rodeos, there is light rain and the first patches of fog. Los Rodeos is a small regional airport with one runway, one parallel taxiway, and a relatively small parking apron. For a normal Sunday, that is enough for the traffic it handles. And as usual, only 2 controllers are on duty today. But then, Las Palmas closes. Aircraft that were supposed to land on the neighboring island all begin arriving one after another. The parking stands fill first. And once they are full, the controllers have to start using the taxiway itself as overflow parking. At the far end, near the entrance to runway 12, a Braathens 737 takes the first position. When KLM 4805 lands, it parks behind it. Over the next 20 minutes, a Boeing 727 and a DC-8 arrive as well. And then, 15 minutes later, Clipper Victor lands. The Pan Am taxis down and parks behind the 4 aircraft already gathered at the head of the taxiway. But the diversions don't stop there. Soon, the entire parallel taxiway has turned into a parking lot. And the aircraft, packed one behind another, are all waiting for Las Palmas to reopen. But for the moment, none of them are going anywhere. With the reopening time at Las Palmas unknown, the crews settle in for the long wait. The KLM and the Pan Am arrived just 37 minutes apart. But in those 37 minutes, Los Rodeos became a very different airport. When the KLM came in first, the terminal still had room for its 235 passengers. So they were all bussed inside to wait it out. But by the time Clipper Victor arrived, the terminal was full. Her passengers had nowhere to go. The Pan Am passengers had to remain inside the airplane. Both captains are under time pressure. The Pan Am captain's deadline is the departure time of the Golden Odyssey. That ship won't wait forever. Most of his passengers are retirees, and for many of them, this is a once-in-a-lifetime trip. If he can't get them to Las Palmas on time, the holiday that they crossed an ocean for will be over before it begins. The KLM captain's deadline is his crew's duty time limits. They still have several hours left, but they also have a long journey ahead. The crew must leave Tenerife, fly to Las Palmas, and then get the aircraft all the way back to Amsterdam before their permitted working day runs out. If they cannot, they have to stop flying, and all their passengers will be stranded overnight at Tenerife. And the passengers already waiting at Las Palmas for their ride home to Amsterdam, they too won't have a plane to board. Every hour they lose on the ground is an hour that they no longer have to get back home. Nearly an hour of that time disappears. And then, the news that everyone has been waiting for comes over the radio. The search has found nothing. There is no second bomb. Las Palmas is open for business. Across Los Rodeos, engines begin to start. Every diverted aircraft wants to leave as quickly as possible. The Braathens 737 at the head of the queue taxis out and departs first. That puts the KLM next in line. But it cannot leave yet. Its 235 passengers are scattered throughout the overcrowded terminal, and the loudspeakers are calling them back to the aircraft. Getting everyone back on board takes time. Time that Van Zanten can no longer afford to waste. The 2 smaller aircraft nearby, a Boeing 727 and a DC-8, have enough room to squeeze past. One after another, they edge around the parked KLM, taxi onto the runway, and depart. They disappear into the rest of their ordinary lives. While he waits for his passengers to return, Van Zanten makes a decision. He tells the tower that he intends to take on more fuel, and refueling will keep his aircraft on the ground for approximately another half an hour. But why refuel now when Las Palmas is reopened and everyone is trying to leave? After leaving Tenerife, the KLM still has to fly to Las Palmas, unload its passengers, take on a new group, and continue home to Amsterdam, all before the crew reaches its duty time limits. And Las Palmas is about to receive every aircraft that was diverted from it. Gates, ground crews, and fuel trucks will all be in demand. Refueling there could cost Van Zanten time that he does not have. So, he orders 55,000 liters of jet fuel, enough to reach Las Palmas and then continue all the way to Amsterdam. But that decision has three consequences. First, it keeps both the 747s at Los Rodeos for another 30 minutes. Second, it makes the KLM approximately 45 tons heavier. It will accelerate more slowly, require more runway, and climb less readily when Van Zanten rotates. And third, there are now 45 additional tons of flammable kerosene inside its wings. None of this matters as long as nothing goes wrong. While the fuel flows, the KLM passengers are brought back from the terminal. All of them reboard except one. Robina van Landschot is 25 years old and works for the tour company that chartered the flight. Unlike the passengers around her, she lives in Tenerife. Her apartment is here, her boyfriend is here, and the aircraft is about to take her away to Las Palmas. And so, Robina refuses to get back on. Her colleagues try to persuade her, but she collects her things and walks out of the airport. The Pan Am passengers never left the airplane. Clipper Victor is ready to leave. Captain Grubbs hears the KLM call for fuel over the radio, and he is not happy. His clock is ticking too, and the only thing standing between his aircraft and the open runway is a Dutch jumbo that's parked ahead of him, drinking from a fuel truck. So Grubbs asks the obvious question.
Can we just go around him?
He sends First Officer Bragg and Flight Engineer Warnes down onto the tarmac to find out. The two men walk out through the drizzle under the wing of the KLM and pace the gap. Step by step, heel to toe. They come back with the answer. 12 feet. Clipper Victor is 12 feet too wide to get through. Had that parking apron been 12 feet wider, Clipper Victor squeezes past, taxis out, and takes off, and vanishes from the story entirely. But instead, 396 people sit and wait behind a refueling KLM. And while they wait, they look out the window. Up on the ridge besides the airport, the cloud that has sat there all afternoon has started to move. Now, looking back at a story like this, we have the advantage the people inside it never had. We can see the whole picture. But in real time, that picture is much harder to build. You've often told me in the comments that wing stories feel comprehensive and that you learn something you had not heard before. Ground News is one of the tools I use to compare how a story is being covered before I begin putting the full picture together. So I'm excited to partner with them on this video. Ground News doesn't remove bias. It just makes it easier to see before it shapes your understanding. And the biggest story in aviation right now is proving exactly why that matters. Take the latest development in the Air India Flight 171 investigation. In an affidavit before India's Supreme Court, investigators said that the probe has entered its final stages, with a draft report expected by October. Ground News has gathered 41 sources covering that development on a single page. And now watch what that framing does. One left-leaning headline says, "Pilot blame narrative is affecting the witnesses." A right-leaning headline says, "How the Dreamliner flight ended in disaster." The first makes a story about the damage of premature accusations. The second presents a cause as if it's settled before the official probe has even finished. It's the same court filing, but a completely different picture. And if you look at the bias distribution for this story, only 19% lean left, making the story a potential blind spot just by sheer numbers. You can see more stories like this on the blind spot feed, which surfaces stories receiving disproportionate attention from only one side, helping you notice what your usual news feed may never show you. I encourage you to check it out. Scan the QR code or go to groundnews/wings. My viewers can subscribe to save 40% off the Vantage plan for unlimited access, which is the one that I use. That's ground.news/WYNGX. The link is in the description. Thank you to Ground News for supporting this video. At 4:45 p.m., the fuel truck pulls away. The paperwork is signed, the doors close, and by 5, the Rhine's 4 engines are running. And KLM 4805 calls for taxi.
Tenerife, KLM 4805. We require backtrack on 12 for takeoff on runway 30.
Okay, 4805, taxi to the holding position runway 30. Taxi into the runway and leave runway 3 to your left.
The controller's original plan is simple on a map. The KLM will enter runway 12, pass the aircraft blocking the paddle taxiway, leave through the 3rd intersection, and follow the clear section of taxiway to the threshold of runway 30. And it will then position itself for a takeoff. But listen to the readback.
Roger, sir. Entering the runway at this time. And the first taxiway, we go off the runway again for the beginning of runway 30.
The controller said 3rd. Mears is understood 1st. The controller realizes that the instruction has not landed clearly. And rather than explain the intersections again, he simplifies the plan. He instructs the KLM to forget the intersections.
Okay, KLM 80, correction 4805, taxi straight ahead. And for the runway, make a backtrack.
Roger, make a backtrack.
The KLM will taxi and stay on the runway all the way to the end, turn around, and line up facing the opposite direction. This maneuver is called a backtrack.
KLM 4805 is now on the runway.
The KLM enters the runway. It will never leave it. The slight drizzle continues. Ahead of the KLM, there's a haze all the way to the other side of the runway. The aircraft rolls forward, and it begins crawling along the center line. But inside the cockpit, Mears remains unsure that he has understood the ATC instructions correctly. As the aircraft moves along the runway, he calls the controller once more.
Approach, you want us to turn left at Charlie 1, taxiway Charlie 1.
Negative. Taxi straight ahead and up to the end of the runway and make backtrack.
Okay, sir.
Why is an apparently simple instruction proving so difficult? English is not the first language of either the Dutch crew or the Spanish controller, and the different accents leave less room for error. The KLM crew had also expected to leave the runway at the first intersection. So when the controller said 3rd, it did not match the route that they had already formed in their minds. Right now, the Flying Dutchman is crawling along the runway. And somewhere behind it, hidden in the haze, a second set of engines begin to turn. With its engines running, Pan Am 1736 contacts Tenerife and confirms the taxi instructions.
Tenerife, the Clipper 1736.
Clipper 1736, Tenerife.
We were instructed to contact you and also to taxi down the runway. Is that correct?
Affirmative. Taxi into the runway and leave the runway 3rd to your left.
3rd to the left. Okay.
The controller's plan is simple to see on the map. The KLM will continue to the far end of the runway and turn around. The Pan Am will follow it onto runway 12, leave through the 3rd intersection, and clear the runway before the KLM begins its takeoff. But even before the Pan Am begins to move, there is confusion in the cockpit about which exit the controller said.
Third, he said.
I think he said first.
I'll ask him again.
Remember, just minutes earlier, the KLM crew had also stumbled over the same two words. First, third. Clipper Victor now enters the runway. And at almost that exact moment, the weather changes. A bank of low cloud slides down from the hillside and moves across the airfield. What had been a slight haze just moments ago has now become a wall of grey. Visibility has fallen to 300 meters. In front of them, the KLM disappears inside the fog, and the tower loses sight of both the aircraft. Los Rodeos does not have ground radar.
KLM 4805, how many taxiways did you pass?
I think we just passed Charlie 4 now.
Clipper Victor begins crawling forward into the clouds. Its crew must find the third intersection on the left, but Los Rodeos gives them almost nothing to work with. From the runway, there are no signs clearly identifying each intersection. Through the cloud, every exit looks like an unmarked road peeling away from the pavement. This crew has never been to this airport before. Everything is new, and right now they are working on their departure checklists, and their attention is divided between configuring the airplane and trying to locate their exit. On the airport chart, the third intersection is called Charlie 3. Charlie 3 is the first exit that reaches the clear section of the parallel taxiway. But from the cockpit of a Boeing 747, it looks like a completely unnatural turn. Charlie 3 would require a sharp turn to the left, followed immediately by a sharp turn to the right. So the crew begins to wonder whether the controller is counting the intersections differently.
Would you confirm that you want the Clipper 1736 to turn left at the third intersection?
The third one, sir. 1, 2, 3. Third. Third one.
Very good, thank you.
That's what we need, right? The third one.
With that, the controller has removed any doubt about the number. 1, 2, 3. Charlie 3. They know exactly which exit he wants them to use. Now, they just have to find it inside the cloud. Clipper Victor crawls deeper into the cloud. The tower calls again.
Clipper 1736, report leaving the runway.
Until the crew reports that they have cleared the runway, the controller cannot allow the KLM to take off. Inside Clipper Victor, the departure checks continue, and the crew searches for Charlie 3. They spot the first exit, Charlie 1.
There's one. That's the 90 degree.
At the opposite end of the runway, the KLM is approaching the point where it will turn around. The visibility is getting worse, and Van Zanten asks about one of the few visual guides that could help him during takeoff.
Tenerife, KLM 4805, are the runway centerline lights in service?
KLM 4805 and Clipper 1736, for your information, the centerline lighting is out of service.
For Van Zanten, that's not good news. Without the centerline lights, the KLM's minimum visibility for takeoff is higher. His legal clock is already running down, and now the cloud is thickening too. If the visibility falls much further, the KLM may not be able to leave at all. Further down the runway, another opening appears besides the Pan Am.
That's 2.
But that is not the second intersection. This one is actually Charlie 3. Somewhere behind them, Charlie 2 has passed unseen through the cloud. The exit count inside the cockpit is now wrong. They will think that the next intersection they see is Charlie 3. But in reality, that intersection will be Charlie 4. Unlike Charlie 3, Charlie 4 turns gently away from the runway and leads naturally towards a parallel taxiway. It looks exactly like the exit that they expect the controller to have chosen. So the pieces seem to fit. The controller said third, their count says the next exit is third, and the angle looks like the route they expected.
Next one is almost a 45, huh?
Yeah, but it goes ahead. I think it's going to put us on the taxiway.
Maybe he counts these as 3.
And through the clouds ahead, Charlie 4 is beginning to appear. Behind their left wing, the real third intersection slips away into the fog. Clipper Victor continues down the runway. At the far end of the runway, the Rhine completes its turn. Van Zanten brings the Boeing 747 around through 180 degrees and lines it up with runway 30. At this end of the airfield, the drifting cloud has briefly thinned. The runway ahead looks clearer than it did during the taxi. They switch their windshield wipers off. Elsewhere on the same runway, the Pan Am remains buried inside the cloud. With the cloud briefly lifting, visibility at the KLM end of the runway is now above its takeoff minimum.
Wing flaps set. Flight controls checked. Stabilizer trim set. Takeoff data checked. Departure checklist complete.
The KLM's takeoff checklist is complete. Van Zanten holds the aircraft on its brakes and brings the engine slightly above idle, allowing all the 4 engines to stabilize. And then, without a word, Van Zanten's hand moves the thrust levers forward. But before he releases the brakes, First Officer Mears stops him.
Wait a minute, we don't have an ATC clearance.
Nee, dat weet ik. Vraag maar.
Before taking off, the KLM needs 2 separate permissions from the controller. The first is an ATC route clearance. This tells the crew where to fly after departure. And the second is a takeoff clearance. This is permission to release the brakes and begin the takeoff roll. They are not the same thing, but Mears asks for both in the same transmission.
The KLM 4805 is now ready for takeoff. And we are waiting for our ATC clearance.
The controller answers with the route clearance. Nothing in the reply gives the KLM permission to move. But listen to the words that he uses.
KLM 8705, you are cleared to the Papa Beacon. Climb to and maintain flight level 90. Right turn after takeoff.
Cleared after takeoff. The controller is describing what the aircraft must do once it is airborne. But inside the KLM cockpit, the captain hears the words cleared and takeoff. Before the controller has even finished speaking, Van Zanten responds.
Ja.
Mears begins reading the route clearance back.
Roger, sir. We are clear.
And while his first officer is still talking to the tower, Van Zanten releases the brakes.
We gaan. Check thrust.
Thrust levers forward. The engines accelerate. The fully loaded 747 begins to roll. Mears is now completing a radio transmission inside an aircraft that has already started moving. At the end of the readback, he adds a phrase that investigators will debate for years.
And we are now at takeoff.
We are now at takeoff. What does that mean? Does it mean we are now at the takeoff position, holding and ready? Or does it mean we are now physically taking off? In the tower, the controller hears it the first way. Of course he does. He has not issued a takeoff clearance. In the picture inside his head, the KLM must therefore be standing at the threshold, reporting that it is ready. And so he responds,
Okay.
and then he pauses. But at that same moment, somewhere inside the cloud, another crew reaches for its radio. 1,700 meters down the fog-covered runway, the Pan Am crew has also heard the KLM's final words. We are now at takeoff. They do not know whether the KLM is holding at the threshold or already moving. But they know one thing. The runway is not clear. They are still on it.
And we're still taxiing down the runway, the Clipper 1736.
At almost exactly the same moment, the controller resumes his instruction to the KLM.
Stand by for takeoff. I will call you.
The Pan Am and the controller transmit at the same time. The 2-second pause has fooled the Pan Am crew too. They heard, "Okay," thought the controller had finished talking, and began transmitting just as the controller started speaking again. The controller is telling the KLM to wait. The Pan Am is telling them that the runway is occupied. Either message, if understood, should stop the takeoff. But instead, both the transmissions mask each other. When two stations transmit simultaneously, their signals collide. They interfere with one another, and they produce a single howling squeal at the receiving end. Inside the KLM cockpit, only the first word arrives clearly.
Okay.
Then, 3.5 seconds of shrieking interference. Buried inside that sound is the controller ordering them to wait. Buried inside that sound is the Pan Am reporting that the runway is occupied. The KLM crew has not understood either message, and neither sender knows that its warning has failed. Inside the KLM cockpit, the last clear word from the tower is okay. And through the fog, the KLM keeps accelerating. The interference ends. The frequency is clear again. Believing the KLM is holding at the threshold, waiting for his call, the controller turns his attention back to the Pan Am.
Papa Alpha 1736, report the runway clear.
Okay, we'll report when we're clear.
Thank you.
Every word here is clearly audible inside the accelerating KLM. And one member of the crew hears the problem. Flight engineer Willem Schroeder. The two pilots are looking outside, concentrating on a takeoff roll through only a few hundred meters of visibility. The transmission does not contain their call sign, and so to them, this is just background radio traffic. But Schroeder is listening, and something in it does not make sense. The tower has just asked the Pan Am to report when it leaves the runway. Leaves the runway? Wait, is the Pan Am still on the runway? He leans forward, and over the roar of the 4 engines at takeoff power, asks the captain,
Is hij er niet af dan? Wat zeg je? Is he not off yet? That Pan American.
Both pilots answer at once.
Jawel.
Jawel is not a casual yes. In Dutch, it is an emphatic one. A word you use to correct someone when they say something wrong. Schroeder accepts the answer, and the KLM keeps accelerating. The Dutch investigators later calculated the KLM speed and position at the moment that word was spoken. According to their analysis, a rejected takeoff begun at Jawel would have still stopped the aircraft before the collision. Schroeder has asked the right question. He receives the wrong answer, and the last chance to stop the takeoff disappears.
No open sky.
Inside the Pan Am, the uncertainty remains. They do not know what the KLM is doing at the far end of the runway. Has it already started to move? They have just reminded the tower that they are still on the runway.
Let's get the hell out of here.
Then, 2 lights appear in the fog ahead. Dim, then brighter, then larger, and unmistakably moving. From this moment on, 9.5 seconds remain.
There he is. Look at him. God damn, that son of a...
Just coming.
Get off, get off, get off!
Grubbs pushes all 4 throttles forward and turns the tiller hard to the left, trying to drag hundreds of tons of aircraft off the runway and onto the grass. Clipper Victor begins to turn, but slowly, far too slowly. Its enormous fuselage swings across the runway. Inside the KLM, Mears calls V1, decision speed. There is no longer enough runway ahead to stop safely. And then Van Zanten sees it. A shape inside the fog. The hump. The broadside of another 747 turning across his runway. There is only one thing left to do. He tries to climb over it. Van Zanten pulls the control column fully back. The KLM rotates so early that its tail strikes the concrete and grinds along the runway for 20 meters. throwing sparks into the cloud. The captain's final recorded words leave the cockpit.
Oh, godverdomme!
And the Rhine, heavy with the fuel loaded to save time, claws itself into the air.
The earth has nothing left to say. Fire climbs into the cloud
For one impossible fraction of a second, it almost works. The nose clears the Pan Am. The nose landing gear clears it too. But then, everything else arrives. At approximately 140 knots, the KLM's engines, lower fuselage, and main landing gear tear through the top of Clipper Victor. The upper deck is ripped apart. The roof is peeled open. The tail is sheared away. The KLM remains airborne for another 150 meters. And then it falls. It strikes the runway and slides another 300 meters on its belly. The fuel in its wings ignites. The fireball consumes the aircraft. 2 planes are burning on the runway. The fire crews rush to the KLM and begin fighting the fire. But through the fog, they cannot even see the Pan Am that is burning a few hundred meters farther down the runway. They do not know that there is another aircraft burning. And inside that aircraft, people are still alive. For more than 20 minutes, while the emergency response remains concentrated around the KLM, the survivors of the Pan Am are left to escape on their own. Many escape through openings torn into the fuselage. They climb onto the left wing and jump to the ground. Captain Grubbs, First Officer Bragg, and Flight Engineer Vance all get out. Robina Van Landshot, the tour employee who refused to reboard the KLM, is already a few kilometers away with her boyfriend. Of the 235 passengers who landed at Tenerife aboard the KLM, she is the only one still alive. 61 people from the Pan Am survive. 583 do not. It was the deadliest accident in aviation history. It still is. What Van Zanten did was never in dispute. He began his takeoff without clearance. It is on the tape. But how did one of the most experienced pilots in Europe become completely certain of something that was just not true? For most of the previous 12 weeks, Van Zanten had not been flying passengers. He had been training pilots inside a simulator. And in a simulator, the person who said cleared for takeoff was Van Zanten himself. Investigators wondered whether his simulator work conditioned Van Zanten to hear what he wanted to hear. He heard the word takeoff and believed it was clearance to take off. And so the rules became clearer. The word takeoff is now used only for a clearance to take off or when that clearance is cancelled. For everything else, the word departure is used instead. Instructions also had to be spoken clearly and read back correctly so that both sides could catch a misunderstanding before it became fatal. And then there was a second fix. They called it crew resource management. These days, any pilot who sees the captain making a mistake is trained to intervene and speak up, out loud, and the captain is trained not to ignore it. A bomb in a flower shop, 12 feet of missing space, 55,000 liters of fuel, a cloud crossing the runway, an exit missed in the fog, a takeoff begun without permission, a 2-second pause, a squeal on the radio, a single word, Jawel. Break the chain at any of these points and 583 people land at Las Palmas. They scatter to their ships, their hotels, and their homes and live the rest of their lives without ever knowing how close they came. But instead, The Golden Odyssey sailed that evening with cabins that stayed empty. Booked, paid for, waiting for passengers who were never coming.